G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to Subnautica with Mags. So today's video is going to be a little bit shorter than my normal Subnautica videos would be, because for the most part I'm actually transferring Subnautica over to my Twitch streams from this point on. It's a game that actually plays better that way, especially when considered how I used to do my Subnautica videos. But this one here is less about the gameplay itself and more of an update video on, well, the state of Subnautica as it is. If you've been monitoring the game recently, you would have noticed that the price of Subnautica is just about to, or by the time this video comes out, may have just increased. This is because Subnautica is getting ready to leave its early access period. At this point, Subnautica is just about complete. Now, over the course of covering this game for, well over a year at this point, close to a year and a half I believe, and having been playing this game since it first entered early access, I've noticed a lot of things about it, both good and bad. So as we're getting to that point, I think it's time we actually run over, especially considering that I've taken a bit of a gap from the game on channel over the last 2 to 3 major patches that the game has put out, giving it an opportunity to mature so I can come back to it. So, during the course of the development there has been a couple of major issues. Optimization was always a problem, but that was hardly as surprising. There is very little point to optimizing a game that is still in heavy development, as future patches are likely to break that optimization, requiring you to go through the entire process again. But we are now at the point where this sort of stuff does need to be done. Other problems included the pop-in, the maximum view distance, the distance at which some items and some effects would render into the game, pauses during the loading of a new biome that were well beyond just the pop-in effects, the user interface both in appearance and in functionality, as well as the crafting system itself, availability of resources and the positioning of certain tech items. All of this has changed, a lot of it in these last couple of patches. So first, let's talk about the optimization. The game is now fantastic. It has never run as smoothly as it does at this moment. It blew my mind the first time loading it up after being away from the game for more than a couple of months and seeing exactly how well it now runs. The maximum view distance has also increased, with items now rendering admittedly in a lower detail at the extreme ends of this visual range. Now, while they are in lower detail, coupled with the underwater environment and the murky drawing in the distance of the ocean, this works quite well, and these items are easily identifiable at the extreme distance. And they fade in quite smoothly as well, appearing to just come out of the gloom, as you would sort of expect considering the nature of the environment. Now, as you get closer to these terrain items, you begin to get the detailed items start spawning in, and this is where the pop-up used to occur. And unfortunately, there is still a little bit of that. For the most part, the items seem to fade in quite smoothly. There is now an option in the menu system to increase that if necessary, but you do get the odd moment every now and again when you'll be looking away from a section at an item on the ground, a tech item or a resource, and then look up and suddenly see the entire kelp forest that was not there a few moments beforehand render in all in the space of a single frame, and it was not there previously. Now, this is not unlike previous versions of the game, and it was something that I was really hoping to see improved. However, well, it sort of has been, if I'm perfectly honest. While this does happen, it does not happen anywhere near as much as it used to, and it's usually only when you're on the fringe of a new area that you have not passed through in that particular playthrough. Now compare this sometimes to the previous versions of the game where this was guaranteed to happen whenever you went near a new biome that you had not passed through before. Although the pop-in itself was never actually a major problem, what was more of an issue was the sudden drop of frames and the freezing of the game as your hardware struggled to suddenly render in this extremely detailed section of the map that it hadn't even had to load before. Thankfully, as far as I've been able to tell, this freeze, this drop of frames, again, is something that has completely disappeared in the patches that have been released recently. The pop-in still exists, but your computer's not going to try and shut itself down in the process of actually loading in the environment. So this makes it more of a visual annoyance than anything else. So from there we've got the UI, which has changed and gone through quite a few iterations, especially over the last couple of patches. For the most part, I do like the new look, although I didn't exactly find the old UI to be in any way a problem. So that comes down to personal preference. I don't really have a problem either way. However, The PDA has received some significant changes over the last couple of patches, and I really do like what they've done with it there. It now displays information better, takes up less screen real estate. It still allows you some of your ability to see beyond the PDA when it's up now, which was a little bit of an issue in previous versions. It also now has a better inventory management system, things are far more understandable, and most of all, it's significantly more vibrant. It is much more colourful and much more attractive to look at. So overall, I really do like the UI changes at this point. Resources has also been corrected. In the past, it was possible to go to some of the areas that were still under construction that weren't overly difficult to get to, and if you played around with the resources in there for long enough, you were likely to get access to stuff that would be considered endgame resources for building some of the most powerful items in the game. All of that seems to be corrected. In fact, as far as I've been able to tell, all of the primary tech items now make logical sense, so as you get deeper, the items you gain access to will get more powerful. However, you're not going to run into a situation anymore where in order to get a new piece of tech, you're going to have to dive to a depth that you would need the complete form of this new piece of tech to be able to get to. For example, there was one point in the past of Subnautica where to complete the Cyclops, you needed a Cyclops, because the final part of the Cyclops that you needed to unlock was at a depth well below the maximum capabilities of the Seamoth or your ability to freedive. Likewise, the resources that you need in order to build these tech items again appears to be at the appropriate depths for the kind of tech that you're trying to build at that time. At this point, I've had no problems finding any of the resources that I need in order to be able to advance the game, and I've managed to find these resources rather quickly, as it has not taken any more than about 10 to 20 minutes at tops to find the pieces that I'm after, providing that I am in the right biome for the appropriate resource, and am looking for the right thing. So overall, this is all fantastic. The game runs better, it looks better, you can see further. The small issue of pop-in is still there, but it's no longer a game-breaking problem, it's more of a minor annoyance. The tech is spread out widely. The few pieces of tech that were floating around, such as the power transfer stations, which were previously represented by just a flat grey polygon within the game with a glowy point on top of it, have been replaced, and they now have actual 3D models, as do most of the items in the game. The days of the old square with a basic texture on it to represent something that you've dropped out of your inventory seems to be gone as well. The amount of water, food, and power consumption has also been tweaked as well, which is an excellent thing for gameplay. In the past, I felt like the player character was burning through water and food far too quickly, leading to a situation where, along with doing what you were trying to do within the game world, you were nearly constantly having to manage food and water in order to keep yourself going. This is one of those annoying little things that can happen in a lot of survival games. Well, thankfully, they seem to have corrected it here. At this point, I can get around half an hour to 40 minutes worth of gameplay uninterrupted before needing to consume anything to keep the player character operational, and the amount that needs to be consumed, while still appearing to be too much, several litres of water and several fish all in a single sitting, it is not to the extreme ends that it has been in the past. This will straight up buy you another half hour to 40 minutes to go around, providing you consume yourself back to full, so
30 seconds.
This is much improved. The rate of consumption of oxygen within the tanks is still rather high, which I would like to see more, but that oxygen consumption is a large part of the gameplay. It encourages you to develop the tech that allows you to get bigger air tanks in order to be able to stay down for longer, and of course force you into a situation where you start building the larger vehicles, which can act as air resupply points while submerged, providing their power. And speaking of power, power consumption was always a major issue as well, with devices such as the Seamoth consuming power at a rate that made them almost unusable. Thankfully, this has been improved as well. Where I used to have to travel through Subnautica with a backpack full of batteries in order to power all my devices while being away from my base, now simply going out with the Sea Glide, for example, with a 100% battery and a single spare battery on me, is more than enough to travel a significant distance across the surface of the map. Which of course is very important when trying to do the earlier stages of Subnautica's story. Speaking of the story, at this point it does look like nearly all of it is in. While I can't confirm that completely, as I have not completed the storyline in these most recent patches myself, I do know it is now possible to find a cure, and it is now possible to shut down the defences for the planet. These are clearly some of the final steps that are required in order to complete the campaign for Subnautica. So at this point it's safe to say that the vast majority of the campaign is now in and playable. The only part I'm unsure about is whether or not it's actually possible to complete it, whether or not the final steps are currently in. If they aren't, they are likely to be added in probably the next patch at a guess, as at this point there are only 2 patches remaining before Subnautica official release. The next one is planned for the end of October, and then the actual release date for Subnautica is going to be January 2018. So, from where the game is currently standing this patch, it looks like Unknown Worlds Entertainment is actually right on the money for a successful release out of early access, which, for a survival game, let's be perfectly honest here, is actually not a common occurrence. And more than that, it's one of the few survival games that have managed to reach that final stage, escaping from early access, where it appears the entire community for the game, at least for the most part, are extremely happy with the way the results are going. There seems to be very few complaints across the board with how Subnautica has been developed and how the gameplay has evolved up until this point. The only thing I would like to see worked on just a little bit more would be that pop-in, because it is rather jarring still, as much as it's no longer really affecting game performance. So anyways, ladies and gents, that's the state of Subnautica as it currently stands. If you would like to see any more Subnautica from me, as I said, I'll be doing streams of Subnautica on Twitch, and the VODs will be uploaded to YouTube after they're completed. Also, if you've been sitting on the fence about Subnautica, unsure whether or not to pick it up or not, but have been interested in the project, the game is now in a state where, while not fully released yet, it is entirely playable, and most of the storyline up until the final moments at the very least is currently in and functioning. If this video has gotten out soon enough, it may also still be at its early access price, which would make now the best time to pick it up if you were planning on grabbing it into the future, as it will be slightly cheaper than it will be on full release. Now, if this video has not got out fast enough and the game's price has been bumped by the time you get to watch this, it was marked on the development timeline that there will be a potential discount on release in January 2018. Exactly how much that discount will be, again, absolutely no idea, but it is listed as a extremely high possibility. So keep that one in mind as well. Anyways, ladies and gents, until next time, click that like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, dive smart, dive safe, and I'll catch you in the depths.
Welcome aboard, Captain.